Hey guys, tonight we dive into one of history's great unexplained tragedies, the universal inability of 19th century explorers to remember their socks. You'd think that before setting off across ice fields, jungles, and deserts with names like the Devil's Elbow or Death Valley, someone would have glanced down at their frostbitten ankles and gone, "You know what? Maybe 2 pairs of wool socks wouldn't hurt." But alas, picture it, the year is 1827, and you're trudging through snow so deep your knees haven't seen daylight in 2 weeks. Your sled dogs are judging you, and your breath freezes midair like suspended regret. You've got 6 layers on top, none matching, but for some reason, your feet are wrapped in what feels like an angry carpet remnant. It itches, it stinks, and it's damp from yesterday's sleet that somehow got in through your so-called waterproof boots, which, let's be honest, are just leather pouches with ambition. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you all tune in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're on your way to the Arctic. You the sledge, some salt pork, and a guiding belief that bravery is louder than common sense. Your crew is lively now, still full of the energy that comes from optimism and new thermoses. You whistle a jaunty tune, then cough it out because the air burns. It's minus a lot, and you feel every decimal of it. You check your kit, 3 knives, a sextant, a weather-beaten journal, but your socks already damp. From what you're not even sure. Regret, perhaps. The thing about wool in the 1800s is that it came from sheep that apparently had personal vendettas against comfort. It's scratchy, inconsistent, and oddly absorbent. You could boil it in tea, and it would still smell like wet barnyard. But that's all you've got. Cotton laughable in the cold. Silk only good for dyeing fabulously in tropical humidity. Synthetic blends, you're at least 100 years. Too early for that miracle. What you do have is whale oil. You slather it on your face, hands, even your boots, believing it'll block the cold. It doesn't. But now you're greasy and flammable, which is a fun new personality trait. You smell like a candle that's gone terribly wrong. Historically, these explorers packed light on footgear because they were obsessed with essential tools. Telescopes, pressed plant books, full cranium measuring kits for phrenology studies, because racism doesn't take snow days, but socks. That's where the line got drawn. You pass through your first whiteout on day 3. It's like someone turned the entire world into a blank page and you forgot how to write. You stumble, fall, and when you stand up, your left foot squelches in a new way. Maybe it's the start of trench foot, maybe it's dinner. Historians still argue whether early signs of frostbite were often mistaken for spiritual tests of faith, or just the universe's cruel sense of humor. You set camp. It's a hole in the snow with delusions of grandeur. Your tent is made of seal hide, stitched by someone who believed air circulation was optional. Inside, it's marginally warmer than the outside, but now the smell of feet and absence of socks is even more noticeable. You take off your boots to inspect the damage and are greeted by a sight that would make a foot surgeon weep, red raw and already peeling. You consider burning a journal page for heat, but the ink smells like lead poisoning. Your teammate suggests singing to stay warm. You try. The snow absorbs your song and gives you frost in return. The next morning, your boots have frozen into shape. You force your feet in like stuffing sausages and the wool traitorous as ever refuses to dry. One guy in the group tries lining his boots with pages from the Gentleman's Magazine. Bold move. It backfires. The ink transfers onto his toes, and now he's got Victorian poetry on his foot like a cursed tattoo. Meanwhile, you try the classic trick layer moss in your boots for warmth. Good news, it works. Bad news, it's also housing a family of snow mites. You're not entirely sure they exist, but you swear something bit you in Morse code last night. You think back to the expedition planning meeting months ago. All those slide rulers, all those charts. No one mentioned socks. Historians still argue whether the British Admiralty's obsession with brass instruments directly contributed to polar toe loss. You make a vow sitting on a log and rubbing your feet. With last night's tallow, if you survive this, you will become a sock merchant. Maybe invent some that don't double as sandpaper. Maybe call them toe cozies for the damned. You fall asleep to the sound of snow settling, a distant dog whining, and the quiet ticking of your own poor life choices. One day down, hundreds to go, and no clean socks in sight. You wake to the gentle sensation of your left foot not being there. Of course it is there, technically, but it's also stiff, colorless, and somewhere between frozen fish stick and forgotten Halloween prop. You flex your toes and feel nothing. A fellow explorer helpfully mumbles, "Try slapping it." You do, no change. Now you're just awake, sore, and aware that your expedition leader is already shouting things like, "Daylight's wasting," as if you could even see the sun. You pack up camp layering damp wool against more damp wool. Your socks have the texture of yesterday's oatmeal, and they smell worse. But no one's are better. You swap horror stories over burnt coffee. One man used his extra pair of underwear as a sock liner. Another sewed moss into foot wraps and claims it grew overnight. You suspect he may be hallucinating from foot rot fumes. You pull out your maps. They're stunning. Hand-inked, beautiful, cartographic dreams. And wildly useless. Each one contradicts the last. A river appears where a ridge should be. A mountain disappears entirely. You're following a chart that was copied from another chart, which was based on the idea of a place described by someone who never left the coast. Historians still argue whether many early maps were deliberately exaggerated to impress sponsors or just the result of heroic levels of guesswork. You glance at the compass, it spins, then settles, then spins again. You tap it like it owes you money. A nearby scientist suggests magnetic interference from local iron deposits. You suggest he walk ahead and test that theory with his face. You march forward. The wind picks up howling like it knows you forgot your second pair of socks. You try to stay positive, but it's difficult when your landmarks include tree that looks like it wants to kill you, and boulder vaguely shaped like Queen Victoria's chin. Your party is starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, you should have hired a local guide instead of depending entirely on the memory of one guy who once read a book. You pause for a break. Someone breaks out hardtack biscuits. You bite in. It's less chewable snack and more dental hazard. You crack a molar. The man next to you uses his biscuit to patch a hole in his boot. Another explorer sets his aflame to start a fire. The fact that the biscuit burns like coal is not comforting. You chew your bootlace instead. It's soaked in boot grease, and you pretend it's licorice. Survival is 90% mental gymnastics. As you chart the path forward, someone shouts from the rear. One of the sleds has flipped. Supplies are scattered. You rush back. It's mostly tins of salted meat and, what's this, a single pristine wool sock? Everyone stares in silence. It's sacred. Manna from heaven, you draw straws. The shortest gets to wear it for the night. The rest of you will dream of it. You keep moving, but morale is slipping. The youngest in the group, let's call him Thomas, confesses he thought Antarctica would be more magical. You tell him the real magic is keeping all 10 toes. He's already down 2, probably won't miss them. Night comes, you pitch another tent. You huddle together for warmth and try not to breathe too loudly. Someone forgot their blanket and is now spooning a crate of specimen jars. You try to get some sleep, but it's hard when your feet keep reminding you that they're slowly turning into historical artifacts. In the quiet, someone mutters, "Why didn't we just bring more socks a beat?" Then laughter, delirious, bitter laughter. Because the answer is always the same, someone did bring extra socks back in 1804. That man went mad and used them to build a shrine. No one's seen him since. You wake the next day to frost on your eyebrows and a growing suspicion that the map is upside down. It isn't. You are. You'd slid off a slope in your sleep and are now tangled in ropes and half a tent. Everyone helps untangle you eventually, but not before someone sketches it. You're going to be a footnote in someone's memoir, and not a flattering one. You trudge on. Your sock has formed a crust. You consider naming it. Something noble like St. Crispin the Regretful. One explorer pulls off his boot and finds mold. Not fungus mold. Another's sock fused with his skin. He screams quietly. It's not the worst thing that's happened. You pass another frozen ridge, eyes squinting against wind and bad decisions. The sun never rises, just limps across the sky like it's ashamed. You spot a cairn, someone's attempt to mark the trail. It contains a note. Turn back. You read it, fold it up, use it as a bandage. That night you dream of socks. Thick, clean, blissful socks that never chafe, itch, or dissolve. You weep in your sleep. And so does your neighbor, probably because you just kicked him with your crusty foot stump. The morning begins with a biscuit and ends with a cracked tooth. You're not even sure why you keep eating them. Hardtack, they call it. But hard is too kind. It's less of a food and more of a cruel geological experiment. You could skip stones across the Arctic with these things. You bite down and hear a sound that belongs more in a blacksmith's forge than a breakfast table. A molar shifts. That's fine. You weren't using all of them anyway. And still no socks. You glance down at your feet, which now resemble raw drumsticks left out on the porch. Someone offers to boil snow for foot soak relief. You accept. The resulting liquid smells faintly of despair and beef jerky. But it's warm, and right now, warmth is sacred. You begin the day's march. Your legs ache. Your shoulders feel like someone tied small anvils to them overnight. Every muscle protests loudly. And your feet have evolved. They've ascended into a new realm of pain, somewhere between open flame and sued for negligence. What's worse is that even the wildlife seems to know. A snow hare darts by. It pauses, looks at you, probably feels sorry. You catch yourself whispering to it, "Bring back socks." By midday, your boots have developed their own weather system. You swear it's raining in there. The wool lining, once somewhat fluffy, now resembles shredded cabbage soaked in motor oil. The smell could repel predators. That's your only upside. You stop to examine a cairn left by a prior expedition. Inside notes old provisions, and would you believe it, what used to be a sock? It's stiff, blackened by frost and mildew, curled like a shrimp tail. You poke it with a stick. Someone jokes about putting it on. That someone is quickly silenced. Back at camp, meals are getting creative. One man eats boiled leather, another suggests toasting a rat. You don't have rats, yet, but you do have a dried fish that's been serving as a paperweight. Tonight it's dinner. The problem is food storage is failing, cans freeze, jars shatter. Someone tried to preserve soup in a boot, only to discover that soup now has laces. You warm your hands over a lamp that runs on whale oil and shame. The flame flickers, like it too wants to go home. The expedition leader insists spirits remain high. He pulls out a fiddle and plays something jaunty. Everyone listens in silence. One man sobs quietly, not from the music, but because he thought the fiddle case had socks in it. Historically, this is how it always went. Food was rationed poorly, morale dropped faster than temperatures, and explorers got creative. There are confirmed journals where men talk about eating the bindings of their own books. One entry from an 1832 Arctic voyage simply reads Tuesday leather stew, still no socks. Scholars still argue whether these culinary disasters were simply a result of underestimating the terrain or a weird badge of honor proof that suffering equaled glory. Either way, you chew your salted pork like it personally wronged you and try to ignore the crunch. You wake in the night to the sound of chewing, not animals, people. Desperate, slow, guilty chewing. Someone's eating a candle. You pretend not to notice. The coal gets into your dreams now. You no longer remember what warmth feels like. You think back to childhood barefoot summers, warm floors. Then you glance at your current situation, 6 pairs of socks shared among 15 people, half of whom now resemble hobbling turnips. You miss warmth like you miss dignity. It's a fading concept. You try to repair your sock using thread from a sleeping bag and part of a torn mitten. It holds together just long enough to reach the next mile marker, a wind-blasted rock with more bad news. Your route is blocked by a crevasse, deep, wide, and uncrossable. Debate ensues. Should you backtrack 3 days or attempt to climb around? The leader, ever the optimist, suggests a detour. You, ever the realist, suggest mutiny. The group chooses the detour because, at this point, what's another week of foot pain? As you trudge uphill, you slip. Everyone slips. The incline is covered in ice and regret. You use your pickaxe as a cane, slipping it into the ground and hoping it holds. At one point, your foot goes into a crack, and you feel a sharp tug your sock tears. A loud final RIP. Silence. Mourning. One man crosses himself. You sit, pull off the boot, and examine the damage. The sock's heel is gone. Just gone. Disintegrated into the snowy abyss. You stare down, accepting your fate. From this day forward, your heel will face the cold alone. Dinner is late. Fire won't start. You end up burning one of your maps. Ironically, it's the most accurate one. But it's either that or freeze. You make the trade. The warmth is fleeting, but deeply satisfying. You don't tell the others. That night, wrapped in layers of regret and seal fat, you have a realization. The greatest adventure isn't crossing a frozen wasteland or climbing an uncharted peak. It's surviving 3 weeks in wool socks that hate you and waking up with both feet still attached. You smile, briefly, then you roll over and feel your foot touch the tent wall. It's frozen. Again, of course it is. By now your team has perfected the ancient art of arguing in whispers. It's week 2. Spirits are lower than a mole's basement. You're all cold sore and slowly turning on each other like reality show contestants in period-accurate misery. Breakfast. A tin of something that once resembled beans, but now just jiggles ominously. You eat it anyway. It's warm at least, and your standards fell off a cliff 6 days ago. The topic of conversation this morning: who's the most likely to lose a toe next? It's meant as a joke, but everyone suddenly has somewhere else to look. Except you. You know, it's you. You've got that numb tingle of doom in your left foot, and your sock situation is best described as tragic. See, socks aren't just forgotten, they're dead. The wool has worn thin, the layers have delaminated like peeling paint, and your toes now poke out like protesters. You tried reinforcing them with twine seal fat and prayers, but all you've got is a crunchy bandage that smells of desperation. You march anyway. There's always marching. The wind howls like a caffeinated banshee and cuts through your coat, as if offended by your existence. Visibility is a polite rumor. You follow the person in front of you and hope they know where they're going. Spoiler, they don't. Today's highlight is reaching a flat stretch of snow-covered ground, finally some relief from climbing, until someone yells "hole" and disappears waist-deep into a snow-covered pit. Everyone rushes to help. He's fine, physically, mentally hard to say. His boot came off and the sock went with it. The moment is solemn. You pour a little tea on the spot where it vanished. Tea, by the way, is made from boiled snow, and a leaf someone claims is from a medicinal herb. Tastes like floorboard. Might be floorboard. Historians still argue whether herbal teas on expeditions actually helped or just gave everyone something to hallucinate about. Tensions rise. One man accuses another of hiding extra socks. Voices rise. You step in, trying to de-escalate, but your voice cracks, and it somehow makes things worse. Thomas threatens to walk home barefoot. No one stops him. He makes it 6 paces before collapsing and begging for firewood. You set camp early. No one speaks. You all just sit chewing salted meat and avoiding eye contact. The fire smokes more than it burns, and your boots hiss ominously as they thaw. You peel off a sock and find a surprise. Your foot is steaming. Actually steaming. Like it's a microwaved leftover. You wonder if that's good or bad. Probably bad. But again, standards. There's a joke someone told in the first week back. When moods were high and socks were semi-functional, this journey will make us legends. Now the only legend you're aiming for is first person to return home with all 10 toenails. Later that night, a blizzard hits. Not a romantic one. Not the kind from snow globes or cinematic montages. No, this is an angry, screaming, sideways hurricane of ice that seems personally invested in your suffering. The tent flaps slam. The ropes groan. Your bones feel like they've filed a complaint. You try to sleep, but your toes are burning. Not from heat, from frostbite's twisted little joke called rewarming pain. It's like having lit matches shoved under your nails. You clench your jaw. Think of home. Think of beds, blankets, slippers, warmth that doesn't involve combustion. Your tent mate is mumbling in his sleep something about marmalade and socks. You envy him. He's dreaming of comfort. You're staring at the tent ceiling, planning how to survive with just 8 toes. In the morning, you find a footprint that doesn't belong to anyone in your group. A boot print. Unfamiliar. Everyone gathers. Could be another expedition. Could be someone lost. Could be your own from 2 days ago. Time loops weirdly out here. You follow the trail for a bit, but it vanishes near a ridge. So you return to the old plan trudge. Eat jerky, complain. It's reliable, if uninspiring. Still, something's shifted. The mood's not just cold, it's fractured. People stop sharing supplies. One man sharpens a spoon and eyes it like a weapon. Your tent mate hoards seal grease. Even jokes are bitter now. What do you call a man without socks? Someone asks. The answer? Dead probably. You smile, barely. That evening, while boiling snow for tea, you notice Thomas sitting apart from the group. He's humming, alone, barefoot, socks drying on a stick. He looks peaceful in a way that's frankly disturbing. You check your own feet. The left one is now several colors red-purple and something that might glow in the dark. You decide to double up on rags, anything to stop the wind from whispering directly into your soul through the holes in your boots. There's a strange comfort in this shared misery. It's bonding in a way. You've all forgotten what warm feels like, what dry smells like, and how socks are supposed to work. But you remember laughter even if it's bitter. You remember the shared dream of reaching the coast, or at least a supply drop with something that isn't boiled leather, and you keep going. Because explorers don't quit, even when they're damp-chafed, slightly deranged, and approximately 20% frostbitten foot. Somewhere around day 17, your sense of time slips loose and floats away like a balloon on a windy day. You're not sure if it's a Tuesday or a lifetime since you last saw a sock that didn't resemble a torn oven mitt. The landscape is a blur of white and wind and occasional rock that looks vaguely like the backside of your commanding officer. You name one Captain Buttocks just to keep morale alive. Breakfast today is a mystery stew, and by mystery, you mean someone found it frozen in a tin with no label, no memory of packing it, and a smell that hints at both despair and shoe polish. You eat it. Warmth trumps answers now. Your feet, meanwhile, have developed their own calendar. They mark time in layers of calluses and shifting shades of purple. The socks, if you can still call them that, are more ritual than functional. You wrap them around your toes like ceremonial gauze and hope for the best. Today's terrain is mountainous, not the majestic kind you see on postcards, more the climb this and cry variety. You ascend, slipping on hidden ice, cursing at rocks, and occasionally using your boot as a hammer. The crampons are worn. Your ankles wobble like a Victorian table. And yes, the wind is still trying to write your obituary. At the peak, you pause, breathe, look around. Nothing but snow. Infinite blank and cold. You're struck by how much this place resembles your sock drawer, empty, unforgiving, and possibly haunted. You begin the descent, carefully, one step then another, until someone falls. It's Johnson, tall, broad-shouldered former boxer, down like a sack of regrets, his boot ripped and his sock already. A threadbare legend snapped mid-step like a tragic violin string. You form a human chain to pull him up. It takes time, it takes swearing, but you get him. He's okay-ish. His foot, though purple, puffy, possibly possessed. Someone wraps it in spare cloth. You offer one of your remaining sock fragments. He accepts it like it's holy relic. That night, around a campfire so small it qualifies as a candle, the stories begin. Someone talks about home. Warm fires, dry towels, bathtubs. You try to remember what cotton feels like. The group is quiet. Not sad, just tired in the soul. Your breath rises like ghosts. You all stare into the flames as if they hold a portal. Then the laughing starts. Someone out of nowhere recounts the time a junior officer packed 10 silk handkerchiefs, but no underpants. The memory sparks a ripple of hysteria. Another story follows about a captain who tried to dry socks by hanging them over gunpowder. That did not go well. The laughter grows louder, almost unhinged, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Or freeze, or both. You think back to the early journals, those crisp, noble entries, filled with talk of glory and discovery. But read between the lines and you'll find the truth. We lost a man today, morale is low, socks are soaked, we push forward. Historians still argue whether these omissions were intentional whitewashing or just Victorian stoicism dialed up to 11. Either way, you know the truth now. Adventure is mostly discomfort wrapped in drama, stuffed in a frozen boot. Your own journal reads more like a foot care diary now. Day 12. Toes present but hostile. Day 14. Left sock revolted. Day 15. Learned to count by blisters. And still you march. Through scree, across snow bridges that crack under your weight, over ridges that laugh in your face. Your compass by now is more spiritual suggestion than scientific tool. You navigate by gut sun slants and the occasional pigeon footprint you still don't know where that bird came from. At one point, a sled overturns, scattering your final tea stash. You watch the leaves swirl into the wind like tiny green dreams. Someone whispers, "That was the last good thing in the world." You don't disagree. Later, huddled in your tent, you feel it. Not the cold, not hunger, not the slow decay of your socks. You feel camaraderie. The stupid, resilient kind that only forms when people freeze and suffer together and still manage to share a biscuit or a bitter laugh. You catch a glimpse of your tentmate's foot. It's wrapped in 3 different fabrics and 1 strip of someone's shirt. You raise your eyebrows. He shrugs. Improvisation, he says. It works, sort of. Sleep comes slowly, like everything else out here. You curl into your bag, pull your crusty, sacred sock over the big toe you've begun calling Sir Crispin, and whisper a small prayer for warmth. Outside, the wind sings its endless song. Inside, you dream of fire-soft rugs and that mythical land called dry feet. You open your eyes and instantly regret it. The sunlight bouncing off the snow is less gentle dawn and more weaponized mirror blast. Snow blindness is creeping in, clawing at your vision like a house cat with abandonment issues. You blink. Nothing. Blink again. Vague outlines of misery. Someone hands you makeshift goggles, 2 pieces of wood with slits carved into them. You strap them on, stylish, not even close. Effective barely. But at least now you don't look like you're crying actual icicles. The problem is, nobody packed proper goggles. Why? Same reason no one packed extra socks. Because the people in charge thought frostbite was a sign of masculinity, and planning ahead was for cowards. Your boots are still frozen solid. You wiggle your feet and feel movement, but you can't be sure it's not just your bones rattling from trauma. The socks, what's left of them, are now a stiff, sour-smelling crust glued to your skin. You peel one off. Part of your heel comes with it. You sigh, nod, and stick the whole foot back in. There's no going back now. You start your march. The terrain is flat, endless, and quietly evil. The wind tears across the ice like it's got an agenda. You lean forward, squinting, dragging your sled through what might be the coldest, driest stretch of hell, this side of Neptune. Visibility minimal. Optimism even less. Then someone shouts. You spin, goggles fogging instantly, and stumble toward the sound. It's Jenkins. He's pointing into the distance at what looks like movement. Dark shapes. You all freeze. Could be animals, could be hallucinations, could be other people. Which in this place is about as likely as finding a functioning sock vending machine. Turns out it's camels. Yes, camels. You've reached the edge of a supply route used by a caravan. Somewhere between expedition detour and cartographic delusion, you've crossed into semi-arid terrain. It's not warm, but it's drier, flatter, and absolutely full of confusion. No one saw this coming. You approach a small encampment. Locals greet you with cautious nods and wide eyes. You probably smell like whale oil and poor choices. One man offers a bowl of something steaming. You don't ask, you just drink. It's spicy and warm and maybe goat-related. Doesn't matter, you'd eat a hot shoe right now. Someone asks if they've seen other explorers. The response, a shrug and a gesture toward the south. That's not helpful, but at least you're not alone anymore. You trade for supplies. Tea rice, even dried fruit. Someone whispers, "Do you think they have socks?" You all turn in hope. They don't. Of course they don't. Not your size, not your climate. Still, you accept what they have: strips of cloth, old sandals, herbs for soaking feet. You wrap your socks in the herbs and they immediately smell like soup. But hey, flavored toes are better than rotting toes. You linger in the camp for a day. Let your feet breathe. Let your blisters blink in the sunlight. You share stories with the locals. They laugh when you tell them about the snow. You laugh when they tell you about scorpions. It's mutual trauma bonding. Someone tries riding a camel. That lasts about 7 seconds. The camel turns, glares, and sits down, refusing to move. You name it Admiral Stubborn. As you prepare to leave, one of the locals hands you a small bundle. You unwrap it. Inside, a pair of socks. Hand-stitched, mismatched, clearly made for a child. But you stare at them like they're sacred scripture. You put one on. It doesn't fit, doesn't matter. It's warm. Historians still argue whether supply routes like these were known to early explorers or stumbled upon entirely by accident. Your group now leans toward the latter, because frankly, if anyone had mapped this properly, you wouldn't have spent last week eating stew that may or may not have contained boiled parchment. You march on, leaving the camels and warmth behind, back into colder territory, because your path still stretches for weeks ahead, and the goal, whatever that is now, keeps moving. But something's changed. Your steps feel a little lighter. Maybe it's the new sock. Maybe it's the fact that you remembered what kindness looks like. Or maybe it's just the rice in your stomach. You walk until dusk. Set camp behind a windbreak made of ice and ego. One man uses his new tea ration to soak his feet. You all gather and listen to Jenkins hum a lullaby. No one asks where he learned it. No one cares. It's soothing. Your feet wrapped in layers of patchwork, and hope finally stops screaming. They murmur, they whimper, but they don't scream. You smile just a little, and you think maybe, just maybe, you'll make it home with at least one original toe. It's astonishing how quickly optimism can return when your feet stop threatening mutiny. The socks you received from the caravan, one green, one vaguely orange, aren't exactly luxury wear. They're too small, made of something like woven goat hair, and feel like sandpaper dipped in vinegar. But they're dry, and they're not frozen, and that makes them the most valuable objects you own. The next leg of your journey brings you to uneven terrain, a landscape transitioning from flat desolation to jagged stone. You're no longer on snow or ice, but something worse, mud. Thick, sticky, soul-sucking jungle mud. Every step is a negotiation with gravity. Your boots squelch and your feet, well, they squish. There's a difference. Humidity clings to you like an overly affectionate ant. It coats your face, seeps into your clothes, and soaks straight through your socks within an hour. So much for dryness. The goat socks, overwhelmed by the moisture, begin to stiffen with filth. You pretend not to notice. You're emotionally invested in them now. By midday, your party is swatting mosquitoes the size of thimbles and trying not to breathe too deeply in case you inhale spores bugs or your own dignity. One man claims he saw a monkey steal his glove. Another swears his boot was pulled off by a snake. You suspect the jungle is playing games with all of you. Meals now consist of whatever didn't rot in the last 2 days. Dried meat, mashed root vegetables, some sort of fruit that makes your tongue tingle in a worrying way. You eat while standing because sitting means mud. And the mud is hungry. You spot a strange bird, iridescent, loud, judgmental. It squawks once and drops something from a tree. You look down. It's a sock, just a sock. Mangled, damp. Probably from another expedition or a very fashion-conscious bird. You pick it up, give it a sniff, huge mistake, and tuck it into your bag. It's not wearable yet, but after a proper sun-drying session, it might pass as foot-covering material. You call it Plan B. As you hack through foliage, you start to notice how everything sticks to your legs. Leaves mud leeches. Oh yes, leeches. The day you step into a bog and feel your sock twitch is the day you realize socks are no longer just foot protection, they're leech delivery systems. You peel it off and find 3 wriggling passengers. One man screams, another faints. You calmly flick the leeches away and mutter, "That's it, I'm inventing sandals." Someone else hears you and nods, but with armor. Historians still argue whether 19th century explorers truly grasped the dangers of tropical environments, or if they simply assumed everything south of Spain was a mild vacation. The answer is probably both. At camp that night, you perform your daily ritual sock inspection. Goat sock 1 is intact. Goat sock 2 has developed a hole the size of your thumb. Plan B, the jungle sock, is drying over the fire. It smells like fungus and regret. You attempt to patch the hole using a strip of your undershirt. It works? Kind of. The combination feels like wrapping your foot in soggy ham. But again, standards. You gave those up around the time you ate mystery stew with a stick. Morale is slipping again. The group bickers. One man swears someone stole his laces. Another accuses Thomas of hoarding toe balm. You defuse the argument by tossing everyone a boiled root and declaring it dinner. It works. They're too tired to argue with starch. You lay back in your tent, staring at the canvas above, watching as condensation builds and drips onto your face like passive-aggressive rain. You've stopped caring. You wipe it with your sleeve and close your eyes. In your dream, you walk barefoot through warm grass. No bugs, no moisture, just soft earth and laughter. Then you wake up and immediately swat 3 mosquitoes and a centipede off your leg. Reality is cruel. By now, your socks are semi-permanent. Taking them off invites injury exposure or psychological collapse. You've named them. One is Sir Itchy, the other Duke of Damp. You talk to them sometimes. They don't answer, but they understand. You trudge on the next morning boots, slushing blisters breeding and jungle funk rising around your group like a personal cloud. You wonder what you smell like to animals. Then you see a jaguar 20 feet away and realize not good. It watches. You stare back. It blinks. You blink. Then it disappears. No one speaks for several hours after that. That evening, someone produces a bottle of rum they've been hiding. You all take a sip. It burns like fire and courage. Spirits lift. Feet ache less. One man even dances for 4 seconds, then collapses with a cramp. You all laugh. That night, with feet wrapped in goat hair undershirts and a splash of jungle funk, you drift to sleep with a smile. Because somehow, against all odds, you've made it through another day without losing a toe. Barely. It's hard to describe what cold really means until you're in Antarctica without functioning socks. And now, congratulations, you are. Everything is white. Not the cozy kind of white like fluffy marshmallows or clean laundry. No, this is oppressive, aggressive white. White that stretches forever. White that screams in the wind and tries to suck the warmth out of your bones like a greedy ghost. The snow here doesn't fall. It assaults, sideways, at 60 kilometers per hour. You've been in Antarctica for less than 48 hours and already lost feeling in 2 fingers, possibly 3 toes, and most of your faith in humanity. Your socks, let's talk about. Those are now frozen into the exact shape of your feet. When you remove them at night, which takes 3 people and a campfire, they stand up on their own, like crunchy little foot soldiers. You'd laugh, but your lips are too numb. Morning begins with your boots frozen shut. One man tries to pee on his to thaw them. This leads to a short discussion about dignity, followed by an even shorter discussion about whether dignity still exists this far south. Consensus: no. You march. Each step crunches like you're walking on styrofoam and shattered dreams. Beneath your boots lies a cocktail of packed snow, hidden crevasses, and ice that could crack at any moment. Every step is a gamble. Every breath stings. One of your party members, Jenkins, falls through a snow bridge. He dangles for a full minute, swaying above an abyss. You all scramble to pull him out. When he's back on solid ground, he's laughing, then crying, then laughing again. His sock is gone, lost to the void. You stare at the empty boot and think we should hold a funeral. Instead, someone ties a rag around his foot, and you march on. Tents go up fast that night. It's too cold to waste time. You jam into yours, 5 bodies packed like mismatched sardines. The condensation from your breath freezes instantly on the tent walls. By morning, it'll look like a snow globe exploded inside. Dinner is freeze-dried regret, rehydrated with snowmelt and regret. A double helping. You sip hot broth and try not to think about how many toes you used to have feeling in. Historians still argue whether early explorers underestimated Antarctic weather or simply had a death wish wrapped in a wool scarf. You lean toward the latter, because no rational person looks at a land made entirely of death-colored snow and thinks, yes, I'll spend 6 months here with no backup socks. You drift to sleep, but not deeply. The cold finds its way in always. It squeezes between layers of clothing, pokes under your blanket, and hums lullabies in your frostbitten ears. When you finally slip into dreams, it's only because your body is too tired to protest. You wake to a storm, not the cute romantic kind. This one sounds like the earth is angry, like the sky is tearing apart. Your tent shakes, one pole snaps, someone screams from another tent. You bundle yourself in every layer you have, including your wet barely socks now stiff and comically shaped. You wait and wait. 12 hours pass before the wind dies. You crawl out to a field of white chaos. One sled is gone, buried or blown away. So are 3 rations, 1 notebook, and someone's last bar of chocolate. There is mourning. You regroup, dig out gear, find someone's boot but not the person. They emerge an hour later, covered in snow and sarcasm. I just went to find better weather, they say. Someone else tries to light a fire. It fails. Everything is too wet. You huddle around a tiny stove instead. One man dries his sock over it. The sock catches fire. He stares at it, lets it burn for a moment, and simply mutters, "That tracks." You patch the hole in his boot with a scrap of tarp. The hole in his soul will take longer. Later that day, you spot something remarkable, a penguin. It waddles toward your group fearless. It looks at you like you're the weird one. You try not to cry. It would freeze to your face. The penguin stares at your socks, pecks one of them, and waddles away in disappointment. You've never felt more judged. As night falls again, you try to sleep with your boots on. You don't care about moisture anymore. You care about heat. You would happily wear a soup bowl on your feet if it meant 2 degrees of extra comfort. Your socks, poor things, are now 3 distinct textures, frozen, frayed, and fermented. You talk to them, apologize, promise you'll do better next time. They don't believe you. But you're alive, just barely. And tomorrow you'll keep walking, because that's what explorers do, even when they forgot their socks. The jungle greets you again with open arms, and by arms we mean vines, insects, and humidity thick enough to chew. After weeks of soul-freezing Antarctic misery, your new assignment finds you somewhere in Southeast Asia. Different climate, same bad luck. The only thing consistent, your foot situation, which remains a disgrace to anatomy. You hoped that leaving the ice would at least mean the return of dry, warm feet. But you were wrong. So very, very wrong. The jungle is a soup. The air is hot, the ground is damp, and your socks, if we're still calling them, that are now saturated with equal parts sweat, swamp water, and a general sense of betrayal. You trudge through undergrowth so dense you're half convinced it's trying to push back. You use a machete to carve your way forward, and every swing flicks a new splash of moist horror onto your legs. Each step sounds like you're squeezing a sponge. The inside of your boot could be legally classified as a habitat. Today's special is a mild case of foot rot. You take off your socks at lunch, big mistake, and the smell makes 3 people gag. One guy calls it haunting. Another asks if you've been walking on raw meat. You soak your feet in a nearby creek, but immediately regret it when you see something move in the water, fast. You jump back and realize you've now stepped on a pile of fire ants. Nature is testing you. You are failing. You limp for the rest of the day, your sock now fused to your skin in some damp biological alliance. You try not to think about what's living in there now. The jungle has rules, and your foot hygiene is definitely breaking several of them. By late afternoon, the terrain gets even trickier. You cross a marsh carefully because last time someone fell waist deep and came up screaming about leeches in places leeches should never be. This time you're more prepared. You wrap your feet in strips of banana leaves under the socks, hoping they'll act as a barrier. It works, kind of. The leaves dissolve after about an hour, but you tell yourself it was a good idea. You camp under a tarp surrounded by buzzing and chirping that never ever stops. Bugs are everywhere. In your boots, in your socks, possibly in your soul. You try to dry your socks over the fire again. The left one catches a spark and melts slightly. You now have a small hole near the toe, which you patch with a piece of duct tape. It holds. You feel like a genius. Dinner is rice and something that once had legs. It tastes like chicken if chicken had lived in a compost heap. You eat it. You're too hungry to argue. That night, rain hits like a waterfall. Everything floods. Your tent is wet. Your socks are wet. Your dreams are wet. You lie in a puddle thinking about home, about real socks, about dryers. You sob quietly into your blanket and swear again to never take modern footwear for granted. Historians still argue whether explorers properly understood the rainforest environment or just assumed all foliage was harmless decoration. Spoiler, it's not. Your legs are now covered in scratches, welts, and one suspicious rash, shaped like Tasmania. In the morning, you check your socks. The right one is missing. You panic. You look under your pack, behind your canteen, even inside your hat. Eventually, you find it stuck to the underside of someone else's boot. They'd stepped on it in the night. It now has a footprint baked into the heel. You shrug, put it on anyway, and keep walking. The path narrows. Vines cling to your clothes. Mosquitoes dive bomb you in organized squadrons. You slap yourself more times than you blink. Thomas, bless him, has rigged mosquito netting around his legs like a makeshift sock. It works until it catches fire on the cooking stove and he runs through the camp screaming. The rest of the day passes in a haze of sweat and low-level jungle-induced psychosis. You've started talking to your socks again. They don't talk back, yet, but you're sure they're judging you. You stop by a waterfall, cool, clean, and for 5 glorious minutes, you soak your aching feet in cold water while birds sing overhead. It feels almost magical. You close your eyes, breathe, then you feel something nibble your toe. You're out of the water in a flash, screaming, clutching your socks, like they're your children. No more relaxing. You're done trusting nature. You dry your feet, carefully wrap them in your leaf sock duct tape combo, and put your boots back on. You say a silent prayer to whatever foot gods may exist, because tomorrow's another day, another 20 kilometers, another swamp, and your socks, they'll be with you whether they want to be or not. You'd think the worst thing about stepping into a murky bog would be the smell. Or maybe the cold wet suck as the mud tries to swallow your boots. But no, the worst part is realizing your socks are now a buffet. You take one step into that swamp and immediately feel it, the unmistakable slow-motion horror of something slimy sliding against your skin. Then a second later, a burning pinch. You yell. Everyone turns. No one laughs. They all know what this is. Leeches. You scramble onto a dry patch, tearing at your boots like they've personally betrayed you. When you finally peel off your sock, which now weighs approximately 3 kilos, you find 3 fat, satisfied creatures clinging to your foot like they paid rent. One of them burps. You swear it does. You flick them off with a stick. The stick breaks. You try a knife. Finally, success. You're bleeding a bit, but honestly, it's the least of your worries. You rinse your foot in a puddle. Regret it. That puddle probably has cousins. Welcome to the Great Leech Panic of 1854. The moment when your expedition officially descends into itchy, wet chaos. You were trained for frostbite, dehydration, even snakebite. But no one prepared you for waking up in the middle of the night because a leech has wriggled through your sock and onto your ankle. There's a new ritual now. Every night before bed, leech check. Everyone lines up, drops boots, peels off socks, some now more whole than cloth, and examines each other's feet like suspicious doctors in a fever dream. You find leeches in places you didn't know could grow hair. Your socks' once cherished companions are now porous nightmares. They no longer protect, they invite, they host. One guy claims he felt one wriggle into the seam and take a nap. Another pulls off his sock and finds 4 leeches fighting each other for territory. He gives up and throws the sock into the fire. It screams. You pretend you didn't hear it. From here on out, socks become tactical. You're now crafting foot wraps out of everything: shirts, bandanas, banana leaves, even someone's ruined journal. Thomas uses waxed cloth from an old food pack. It smells like pickled meat, but it's dry, And in this war dry wins. Historians still debate whether leech exposure was just an occupational hazard or the reason so many jungle expeditions quietly lost their enthusiasm. Either way, it explains why half the journal entries from this era suddenly shift from noble purpose to barely legible curses. You're still pushing forward, through mud so thick it could trap a horse, through tree roots that reach up like claws, through rivers that might be rivers or just very determined puddles. You're no longer walking, you're enduring, and it's hot, so hot. The air steams off your skin. Your boots make squish sounds you'll hear in your dreams for decades. And your socks, well, let's be honest, they're gone now. You're down to scraps and hope. Then one day, miraculously, you reach high ground. The mud disappears, the jungle thins. And in the distance, a settlement, civilization. You limp in like a knight returning from battle, covered in sweat blood and foot trauma. They welcome you with cautious nods. You collapse into a stool, remove your boots, and brace yourself. Your feet are something. They look like boiled meat, marinated in despair. A kind old woman offers you herbs. Another gives you a bowl of warm water. You soak. For the first time in weeks, you breathe. You buy socks. They're handmade thick, woven from something scratchy but clean. You slide them on. They don't fight back. They just hug your feet. You nearly cry. You name them. Left is salvation. Right is redemption. You vow to never mistreat them. You rest for 2 days, licking your wounds, eating actual food, drinking tea that doesn't taste like regret. The nightmares of wriggling socks start to fade, slowly, but they never vanish completely. When it's time to leave, you double wrap your feet. New socks, boots polished, leech spray made from a mysterious paste the locals swear by. You head out again, changed, wiser, and with a permanent twitch every time you hear the word bog. The others follow suit. You're united now, not just by suffering, but by survival, and shared trauma therapy revolving around socks. You set out with new resolve, no longer just explorers. Now you're veterans of the Jungle Sock War, and you carry that title with pride. You weren't expecting a science lab in the middle of nowhere, but there it is, just past the mountain ridge, tucked behind a cluster of pine trees like a secret school for people with hypothermia and bad ideas. It's not much 3 weather-beaten buildings, 1 crooked flagpole, and a collection of tired scientists bundled in so many layers they resemble overcooked lasagna. But there's a roof, warmth, and miracle of miracles, a generator. They welcome you cautiously. You're not the first explorers they've seen stumble, in half-frozen and half-mad. One of them offers you a mug of something hot. It tastes like disappointment, but it's warm and doesn't contain leeches, so it's basically a gift from the gods. You sit by the heater and pull off your boots, slowly, carefully. The socks peel off like sticky notes that have been through a war. Everyone looks, no one speaks. Your feet resemble the aftermath of a culinary experiment gone wrong. One scientist offers you iodine. Another suggests a donation to their medical journal. They offer to examine your feet for research. You're too tired to argue. You nod. A medical intern takes notes. You hear the words necrotic, experimental, and interesting coloration. It's not comforting. Over the next few days, you become the lab's most interesting case. Your feet are photographed, drawn, and at one point lightly poked with what you can only describe as scientific chopsticks. They give you clean socks, brand new, white, soft, not military issue sandpaper. You nearly weep. These socks don't just cover your feet, they forgive them. One scientist explains the importance of dry feet in cold climates. You nod politely, resisting the urge to scream, we know, but it turns out they're not just collecting snowflake samples. They're monitoring how the human body deteriorates under extreme environmental stress. You apparently are a textbook. They have data from multiple expeditions, charts showing how frostbite starts in the toes, how moisture trapped in wool accelerates tissue damage. There are even anatomical diagrams labeled typical polar sock failure zones. You stare in disbelief. These people have foot maps, actual foot maps. And no one thought to send them to your group before the journey. Historians still argue whether early polar science was shared effectively between expeditions or hoarded like trade secrets. Based on your suffering, you lean toward hoarded, because if you'd known any of this 6 weeks ago, you might still have full circulation. Your party rests for 2 days. During that time, one member undergoes minor surgery to remove a toe. They do it on a metal tray with a curtain drawn for privacy. You hear everything: the snip, the silence, the muffled, high-pitched scream. Later, he shows you the toe in a jar. You pretend not to gag. On day 3, one of the scientists asks if they can mold your foot for a study. You laugh, assuming it's a joke. It's not. He brings out a bucket of what looks like gray pancake batter and a very serious clipboard. You let them do it. You've been through worse. In return, they give you a small package, foot balm socks with reinforced heels. And get this: heated insoles. Heated insoles. You stare at them like you're holding ancient treasure. You'd trade a sled for these, maybe a crewmate. You suit up again, new socks, foot balm applied like war paint. You march on with your team heading toward the next checkpoint. This time you almost enjoy the walk, not because the terrain is any better, it isn't. You're still trudging through snow and slippery ridges, but because your feet aren't screaming, the heated insoles buzz faintly with warmth. You sigh like you've just dipped into a hot bath. The others look at you with envy. You offer one sock, just one, to Thomas, whose toes are now shaped like question marks. He accepts it with a look that says, "I'd name my first child after you." As you hike, you find yourself reflecting, not on glory, not on medals, but on feet. The way they carried you, failed you, held out longer than expected. You realize how little glory there is in exploration and how much of it comes down to surviving discomfort, long enough to make it to the next rest stop. You arrive at a frozen lake just before sunset. The ice is solid. The view is absurdly beautiful. Golden light hits the snow like spilled honey. You sit on a rock sip from a canteen and admire your toes still attached, still warm, for now. And just as you're beginning to believe things might stay that way, Thomas asks, "You think there are leeches in ice water?" Everyone stares. You sigh deeply, then pull your boots back on, just in case. The Arctic Circle is not a place that welcomes visitors. It tolerates you the way a cat tolerates a toddler, by sitting very still, staring blankly and occasionally clawing when you get too close. But here you are again, staggering across permafrost, with feet that feel like expired meat, and a spirit held together by threadbare socks and blind spite. Today is a hunting day, not for food, no, that ran out 2 days ago. Today you're hunting for lost gear. The wind last night was so violent it peeled off half your camp like a bad sticker. A sled disappeared. A scarf took flight and may now belong to a polar bear. Jenkins lost a boot, which is tragic, but you're more concerned about the sock inside it. It was the good one. You've been tracking polar bear prints all morning. Not because you want to find one, but because they might have wandered off with your equipment. Polar bears, it turns out, do not care about blisters, logistics, or your last remaining toe. They are the apex predators of Not My Problem. The group moves in silence. Each step sends a jolt through your ankles and up into your spine. Your boots are stiff. The insoles are frozen into oddly shaped paddles. The socks, they've fused with the inside of your boot again. You try to wiggle your toes and are met with the warm embrace of absolutely nothing. The nerves are on strike. Then someone shouts. You scramble up a snowy ridge, and there it is, your sled. Flipped, half-buried contents scattered like confetti. Everyone cheers weakly. You rush to the scene, digging through gear until, miracle, you find a footlocker with your name scratched into the side. You pry it open. Inside, clean socks, 2 pairs, rolled, untouched, heavenly. You clutch them like sacred scrolls. One man bows, another cries. You hand out 1 pair to Jenkins, who's been hobbling with a boot lined in moss. He hugs you. It's deeply uncomfortable but earned. Now here's the thing. Changing socks in the Arctic is a tactical operation. You can't just whip them off and switch. That's how toes fall off, literally. No, you must warm them in your armpit first, then gently peel off the old socks, using a technique that resembles degloving a banana. Slowly, tenderly, with immense internal screaming. You do it. 1 toe at a time, you stare at your foot. It's less body part and more early-stage jerky, but it's still there. You whisper a quiet thanks, then slip on the fresh socks. They're warm, not because of heat, everything's cold, but because they're dry, soft, intact. The fibers wrap around your skin like a gentle apology for everything you've endured. You swear your body temperature goes up 3 degrees. The others take turns doing the same. The tent becomes a sock-changing clinic. There's a reverent hush. No one mocks. No one speaks above a whisper. These socks represent something far greater than mere wool. They are hope. Historians still argue whether moments like this were common in polar expeditions, or if the personal diaries left behind simply chose to omit the hysterical crying that occurred when someone found a fresh sock after 6 weeks of foot-related warfare. You believe it was common. You feel it in your newly wrapped toes. The rest of the day passes in something close to bliss. The sky clears. The wind quiets. You make more progress than you've made all week. 1 man starts singing a sea shanty badly. Everyone joins in. Morale for the first time in forever is higher than freezing. Then you spot it. In the distance, barely visible, a polar bear. Large, unbothered, watching. It's standing near something. You lift your spyglass. You squint. It's Jenkins' old boot. The bear pokes at it, sniffs. Then casually it picks it up and wanders off. Everyone is silent. You turn to Jenkins. Well, he says, I hope it enjoys the sock. You pitch camp early that night, tired but satisfied. The tents go up without incident. Dinner is a small stew made from preserved meat and something someone swears is a root vegetable. You eat it gratefully. The socks have done something magical. They've made you believe you might make it out of this alive. You slide into your sleeping bag, now warmer than it's been in weeks. You wiggle your toes. They respond. Not enthusiastically, but they respond. You can feel them. You think you might even hear one of them say thank you. Probably the hypothermia. You drift off with a smile. Tomorrow the ice will come again. The wind will scream. You'll trip, fall, curse, bleed, and blister. But tonight, you sleep like a person with socks. And that, my friend, is everything. You've read the memoirs, the glowing passages about adventure discovery man against nature. Icebergs gleaming in the twilight, noble death under pastel skies, camaraderie forged in adversity. All of it written with such confidence, such elegance. And now here you are, sitting on a half-collapsed crate, foot in hand-toe peeling like a bad citrus fruit. And all you can think is those guys lied. Because what they didn't write about was this: the smell, the grime, the awkward conversations about who peed in the corner of the tent last night because it was too cold to go outside. And especially not the socks those forgotten heroes turned traitorous foot coffins that haunt every step you take. This is the reality. Every day is a battle against frost fatigue and the creeping suspicion that someone else in the group has extra socks and just isn't sharing. The romantic stuff, that's for the sponsors. The actual journey. A slow descent into foot-based existential despair. Today you're repairing a sled. Again, ice cracked one of the runners, and you're using salvaged scrap wood and frozen bootlaces to brace it. The process involves equal parts swearing and whimpering. Your gloves are stiff, your fingers ache, and your toes are barely hanging on. You tried wringing out your socks this morning and watched ice fall out like dandruff. Thomas Ever the Optimist is writing in his journal. You peek over his shoulder. He's doodling penguins wearing monocles. You let him have that fantasy. He's earned it. Then someone finds an old cache left by a previous expedition. A rusted tin of crackers, a flask of something flammable, and a notebook. You gather around, hoping for guidance, maybe a hint that someone else made it through. The entries are vague. Lots of poetic observations about the silence, the endless snow, the spiritual weight of the journey. Then you reach the last few pages. They're different. The handwriting deteriorates. Notes grow erratic. Then a line that makes your stomach drop. I no longer feel my feet. I think the socks are winning. You all stare at it. No one laughs because you get it. Historians often talk about how the romanticism of exploration overshadowed the human suffering involved. But you're living proof that the line between legacy and lunacy is drawn somewhere between trench foot and half-frozen lentil soup. Dinner that night is quiet. The wind rattles the tents. Someone coughs a bit too much. Jenkins mutters about the sock demons again. You smile. Weakly, you check your feet before bed. The new socks from the lab are holding up barely. The right one has developed a thin patch on the heel. You stitch it with dental floss. It holds. You consider patenting the design when you get home. Explorer-grade toe armor. You read aloud from your own journal. It's not poetic. It's not even coherent, but it's real. Day 43. Snow in boots. Blister now talks to me. Named him Gerald. Shared a cracker. He was not impressed. The group chuckles. That's enough. Then you hear it. Outside. A howl. Distant. Not wind. Wolves. You all freeze. Literally and figuratively. No one moves for several minutes. The sound doesn't repeat. You go outside to check, just in case. The moonlight bounces off the snow like liquid mercury. It's stunning, terrifyingly silent, and cold enough to kill your nose hair mid-inhale. You walk a short loop. No wolves, just wind, and something else. You spot it just beyond the ridge of frozen sock, stiff, upright, alone. You approach cautiously as if it might bite. It's ancient, worn through, half buried in frost. You recognize the Weave Standard issue from an expedition 20 years ago. A chill runs through you, and not from the cold. You don't take it. You leave it as a marker, a reminder. Somewhere someone once stood here, looked at this exact same moon, and probably asked the same question. Why the hell didn't I pack more socks? You return to camp, slide back into your sleeping bag, tuck your feet in tight, and sleep wondering what part of your journal will one day be quoted. Probably out of context in a museum placard titled Hardship and Glory, The Frozen Fool's Legacy. It's hard not to feel insulted when the thing that could have saved your feet, the invention that might have spared you from the last 2 months of soggy wool-blistered heels and emotionally abusive sock rotation, gets invented after you need it. But there it is. You're back from the worst of it. Half your toes work. 3 of them sort of hum in certain temperatures. And as you limp through a supply post outside of Oslo, bundled in Victory and iodine bandages, you see it in a shop window. Thermals, not just socks, layered, moisture-wicking, scientifically designed foot sleeves that trap heat, repel dampness, and cradle the soul like a cottony lullaby. You press your face against the glass. You whisper, "Where were you?" The shopkeeper inside raises an eyebrow. You enter trying to look less like a man who nearly lost a toe to a leech and more like a discerning customer. But you fail. The limp gives you away. He offers you a pair to try. You remove one boot, it makes a noise like a dying accordion, and slide the new sock on. And you ascend. You levitate 2 inches off the floor spiritually. The material is soft, resilient, elastic even. It clings in the right places. It breathes. For the first time in months, your foot feels like it belongs to your body again, and not some angry god punishing you for underpacking. The shopkeeper nods solemnly. Good, yes. You nod back, tears forming. You buy 6 pairs. When you return to your group, still thawing out at a makeshift hospital, you show them. They gasp. One man drops a spoon. Jenkins stares for 30 full seconds and utters. They bend. You distribute your extras like medicine. There is reverence. One guy refuses to put his on. Says he'll frame them for future generations. We support this decision. It's worth noting that while thermal wear seems obvious to us now, its evolution was slow and stupid. Historians still argue whether the delay in developing proper thermal socks was due to a lack of materials, lack of need recognition, or simple industrial-grade stubbornness. The earliest attempts included animal pelts tied with twine foot wraps, soaked in alcohol and wool reinforced with newspaper. There are patents from the 1800s that involve steam socks, which actually tried to channel steam into your footwear. Spoiler wet feet and boiling temperatures, not a win. But here now, in the warmth of a wooden hut with a functioning stove and walls that don't shiver in the wind, you pull your new socks on every morning and feel almost human again. You practice walking. The doctor, a cheerful Norwegian man with the bedside manner of a wet fish, taps your feet with a stick. You still have 8.5 toes. That's good. Most come back with less. You beam. You've beaten the odds. The remaining bits of your old socks are burned in a ceremonial fire behind the cabin. Thomas reads a eulogy. They served poorly. They died slowly. They smelled of cheese. May they never return. You all raise a tin mug. Later, when asked about the expedition, the newspapers want the dramatic bits, the storm, the wolves, the near starvation. You give them that. But what you also include on page 3, paragraph 14, is a note. Tell the next team to bring thermal socks, double pairs, triple if they can. Forget the ivory compass, burn the botanical samples if needed, but pack the socks. It becomes a rallying cry in the community, a running joke, an actual embroidered patch. Socks first. You see it years later on the shoulder of a young explorer. heading into the Andes. You stop him. "Those socks you ask, how many?" He grins. 6 pairs, plus thermals, waterproof lining, reinforced toes. You nod with pride. You'll make it. He asks how many you packed back then. You pause. 1. The silence is long and painful, but it ends in laughter, because at the heart of it all, exploration is suffering dressed in wool. And every footstep forward, no matter how cold or blistered, is a victory over your own idiocy. You step outside into the snow. It's not as bitter now. Your socks cushion every step. They love you. And for the first time in months, you walk not trudge, not stagger, not limp. You walk, almost like a human again. You sit down to write a letter home and immediately lie. Not a big lie, just one of those subtle, polite rewrites of reality, where horrific trench foot becomes mild discomfort, and accidentally ate part of a boot becomes tried something new. After all, no one wants to hear the full truth when you're writing from the edge of the map. The quill scratches. The ink freezes slightly as it hits the page. You warm the tip over a candle and keep going. Dearest family, the cold is biting but manageable. Spirits remain high. Our boots serve us well. You pause, glance at the mangled sock drying on a stick across the room, and continue. And we are all in good health, more or less. That part's true if you define good health as still technically alive. Your party is huddled around a low fire steam, rising from damp clothes and bruised morale. Jenkins is drawing something obscene in his journal. Thomas is trying to boil snow into something drinkable. Your toes swaddled in double-layered thermals, and hope finally don't feel like snapping off when flexed. The letters are part of a system. One team member writes each day, hoping the next resupply team will carry them back to civilization. It's a small connection to the world you left behind, to people who right now are probably warm-clothed and entirely unaware of how many ways one can ruin a foot. You write about the view frozen waterfalls sweeping glacial plains, and one ice formation that looks suspiciously like Queen Victoria. You do not write about the time your sock froze to your skin and took a patch of it with it when removed. Some truths are better off as future footnotes in an obscure diary. Later that evening, the letters are bundled and tucked carefully into a waxed pouch. You all take turns pressing them against your chests before sealing them, an odd but quietly solemn ritual. Jenkins mumbles, "In case this is the last thing they hear from us." No one laughs, not tonight. The wind picks up, rattling the walls. You double-check the tent stakes. One blew away last week and was replaced with a spoon. It holds surprisingly well. You're learning a lot about improvisation and how much survival depends on the materials you didn't mean to pack. Your socks, though, are holding. One guy sews a patch onto his using thread from a shredded rucksack. Another is experimenting with layering fabric between 2 mismatched pairs for added insulation. It's a thing now, sock engineering. You all have opinions, heated ones. You remember the early days when losing a sock meant rage, despair, perhaps a tear or two. Now you shrug, patch it, and keep walking. That's growth. That's resilience. That's numbness, literal and emotional. You pull out an old letter someone wrote and left behind in a cabin weeks ago. It's weathered, smudged, but readable. It ends with a line that sticks with you. Tell them it was beautiful even when it wasn't. You stare at that line. It's not wrong. The pain, the cold, the endless foot trauma, it's awful. But also, weirdly, it matters. Because it means you were out here. It means you did something. Historians still debate whether explorers romanticized their journeys out of pride or survival instinct. But you get it now. When you're living through snow blindness, dysentery, and gangrenous pinky toes, sometimes you need a good lie to carry you forward. You look at your team, ragged, sore, missing one or two pieces they probably used to like. But they're still here, still laughing, still arguing over whether rabbit fat or seal fat makes a better foot salve. You write another line. Please don't worry, I have everything I need. You pause, then underline everything. Because thanks to those miracle thermals and your own stubbornness, your feet are intact. And you're beginning to believe that's more important than any medal or map. The letters go out the next morning, carried by a dog sled and one very confused man with a parrot who swears he's been to Alaska 3 times, but doesn't know how to read a compass. You wish him luck. As the sled disappears into the blinding white, you flex your toes again. They respond, not cheerfully, but solidly. The socks are dry, the boots fit. Your feet at long last feel like part of your body again. And for the first time in this entire expedition, you dare to believe you might actually make it home. Every expedition has that one guy, the one who somehow, against all odds and logic, is always clean, always smiling, and never seems to suffer the indignities the rest of you endure. On your team, his name is Lionel. Lionel brought slippers, not boots, not emergency thermal wraps, not an extra set of yak wool socks. Slippers. Fluffy, sheepskin-lined, tan-colored monstrosities that look like they were bought in a cabin gift shop by someone named Martha. He wears them in the tent. He wears them when fetching snow to melt for tea. Once he wore them while casually chasing a fox away from your food stash. You have never wanted to punch someone over footwear more in your life. But here's the thing, Lionel never got frostbite. Not once. His toes pink functional, slightly smug. His socks clean, somehow dry, always in rotation. He has an organizational system, left foot, right foot wash, day wool day. He explains with the gentle tone of a man who does not understand that the rest of you are hanging on by toe hairs. Everyone hates Lionel, and everyone wants to be Lionel. You try asking him casually, how'd you keep them so clean? He just shrugs and says, oh, I always rotate them properly and never wear them 2 days in a row. Also, I line my boots with seal fur liners I stitched myself. Helps wick moisture. You contemplate pushing him into the snow. Instead, you nod and take notes. Later, you sketch a rough diagram, the Lionel sock system. It involves arrows laundering symbols and possibly mild resentment. The team starts emulating him. Slippers are in high demand. One guy tries to make a pair out of stuffed mittens. Another wears thick socks over his boots inside the tent to simulate slipper life. It fails, but you all pretend it helps. Eventually, Lionel becomes something of a legend. Other teams you cross paths with have heard of him. You're with the slipper man, they ask, wide-eyed. Is it true he hasn't lost a toe? You nod and they gasp like you're traveling with Bigfoot in a bathrobe. Historians still debate whether comfort items like slippers had any real impact on expedition survival rates, or if they simply served as morale-boosting placebo. But watching Lionel sip tea in his cozy tent shoes while massaging peppermint oil into his arches makes a pretty strong case for the former. One night a storm hits, a bad one. Tents snap. Snow surges like ocean waves. Your gear goes flying. Everyone scrambles for ropes, shovels, boots, except Lionel. You find him hours later, snug in a half-buried tent, reading by lantern light, slippers still on, brewing what smells suspiciously like lavender tea. You stare. He looks up and says, I made extra. You decide to keep him alive after all. The next day, morale is weirdly high. Maybe it's the slippers. Maybe it's the fact that nobody lost a finger this time. Or maybe, just maybe, it's that Lionel started sharing his system. He lays it out with the precision of a military strategist. Sock schedules, boot airing cycles, tea rotations. You follow it like gospel. Within a week, blisters decrease, toe complaints go down, and most importantly, you all stop hating your feet. Lionel becomes a foot care messiah. He starts giving lectures. Gentlemen, we moisturize before the frostbite starts. You want circulation. Toe stretches every morning. Always talk to your socks. Respect earns resilience. You laugh, but then you start doing it too. And it works. Your feet, once tragic and slowly mutating into cave relics, start to resemble feet again. The right sock no longer slides into the boot abyss. The left sock doesn't smell like a dead seal. This is progress. One evening around the fire, Lionel tells you why he brought slippers. My grandfather, he says, froze 3 toes off in the Alps during a hike. Swore it wasn't the cold that got him but his pride. Thought bringing soft gear was weak. He was wrong. You nod, it makes sense. And that night, wrapped in layers of dry wool slippers borrowed from Lionel himself, you sleep with warm feet and a soul no longer crying out in foot-related agony. It's not the gear that saved you. It was the man who dared to bring house shoes to a snow war. There are maps, there are compasses. There are elaborate, expensive navigational tools carved from brass and optimism. And then there are socks. Yes, socks. Because on day 61, in the middle of a downpour somewhere, in the jungled gut of Borneo, you plug a hole in your canoe with one. Let's rewind. You were paddling, tired, soaked, and about 6 existential crises past caring. The river was calm, deceptively friendly. Birds chirped. A monkey shrieked in the distance. And then crack the canoe hits a submerged rock. A seam splits. Water starts gushing in like it's paying rent. Panic. You scramble for gear. Someone grabs a tin cup, starts bailing. Another tries to stuff moss into the crack. It works for about 4 seconds before turning into a wet salad. The hole gets wider. The boat groans. You're about to consider sacrificing Thomas just to lighten the load. And then, out of nowhere, you remember the sock in your pack. The one you haven't used in weeks because it's crusted with something mysterious and smells like revenge. You pull it out, jam it into the hole. It works. No joke, it actually works. The wool, once saturated with your sweat and misery, expands on contact with the water, plugging the breach like some cursed homemade cork. The canoe holds. You paddle in stunned silence for a full hour. Everyone avoids eye contact with the sock. It just sits there, bulging, slightly leaking in slow rhythm. Jenkins names it the hero. That night you dry it by the fire. Not because you want to wear it again, but because you feel like it's earned the right to live. And that's how the Queen's map got saved. See, tucked under the seat, where the water first began to pool, was a rolled leather satchel containing a map. A very old map, drawn during the reign of Queen Victoria herself, supposedly charting a region untouched by prior explorers. The satchel is soaked, but the map inside is dry, protected by its casing. Had the canoe sunk, the map would have gone with it. So yes, your sock, rotten, reeking, and possibly sentient, saved a colonial artifact of enormous historical value. And not a single historian will ever know. Historians do argue, however, whether many legendary discoveries were actually just lucky accidents. Did explorers find new trade routes because of skill and strategy, or because their supply mule ran off a cliff, forcing them to take the long way around? You now know the answer. Back at camp, the sock gets treated like royalty. Someone sews a tiny medal onto it, a brass button from a torn coat. It's strung up between two poles, a shrine, a warning, a triumph. You all gather for a moment of silence. Jenkins plays a single note on a harmonica. Thomas salutes. You consider writing to the Royal Geographical Society about it. Dear Sirs, please update future expedition manuals. In the event of hull damage, a wool sock may serve as a functional if revolting sealant. You never send it, but the idea lives on. The next morning, someone tries to replicate the feat. They puncture a different canoe on purpose and attempt the same trick with a synthetic sock. It fails immediately. The boat sinks in 30 seconds. The lesson is clear: if you're going to plug a hole with a sock, it must be one that has suffered. You carry the hero with you for the rest of the journey. You don't wear it. You don't dare. It's enshrined. Tucked into a waxed pouch, wrapped in linen like a relic. Every time something bad happens, a leech, a storm, a foot blister, you tap the pouch for luck. It always helps, probably. Even when you make it home, long after the expedition is over, you keep it, mounted in a frame, labeled with a brass plate. Sock left, Borneo expedition, saved 1 map and 5 lives. When you tell the story to your kids, they don't believe it. Dad, you made that up. You show them the frame. They stare in awe or horror, possibly both. Later they ask, why didn't you just bring a patch kit? You pause. You think about the planning, the gear lists, the 1,000 items deemed essential, the cartographer's pens, the fossil brushes, the silverware. But socks were an afterthought, until one saved your life. You shrug and say nobody ever forgets after the first time. The boots are new, the socks are thick, thermal-lined, moisture-wicking miracles. Your gait is steady, the limp mostly gone. Your toes, all 8.5, of them warm and responsive. The expedition is over, and you're back on home soil where the floors aren't made of snow and nothing is trying to eat your ankles. And yet, you don't quite feel finished. There's something surreal about returning to a world of clean floors, quiet streets, and hot food on demand. You stroll past shops selling matching sock sets, 5 pairs for the price of 1 amputated pinky toe, and feel an odd flicker of rage. Where were these when you needed them? You visit the museum. They've opened a small exhibit in your honor footsteps through ice, the final days of the Northern Passage. There's a section on hardship, complete with a mock-up tent and a mannequin wearing your exact gear, including your boots, but not your socks. You ask where they are. The curator gestures to a glass box. Inside, 2 pairs of shredded wool, brown frayed, and delicately labeled. Survivor's Socks, Arctic Expedition. Circa late insanity. You stare at them, you feel nothing, and then everything. Flashbacks come in slow waves. The fire-warmed tent, Lionel's slippers, the jungle leeches, the penguin judging your toe hygiene. You feel the ghost of wet wool wrapping around your arch and shiver. Historians still argue whether suffering elevates discovery or just makes better reading. You're not sure anymore. What you do know is this: socks aren't a detail, they're survival. You step outside and wander the street. People pass you oblivious. Their feet are dry, their socks are clean. You resist the urge to stop them, to grab a stranger and whisper. Never pack just 1 pair. You get home, sit by the fire, pour yourself a drink. You lean back, pull off your boots, and flex your feet. They're still rough. Scars and calluses mark every toe. 1 nail is missing, probably for good, but they're warm, they're clean, and they're yours. You pull out a notebook, not the field one, the real one. The one you hid from the others. The one where you wrote what really happened. You title the first page, Why 19th Century Explorers Always Forgot Their Socks. Then you add the subtitle and why. That's the real reason they all walked funny. You write for hours. You write about frostbite and toe naming ceremonies, about Lionel's slipper doctrine, about burning your own maps for heat, about laughing in the dark because it was better than screaming, about that one sock that plugged a hole in your boat and earned a shrine. You leave nothing out this time. The truth, the pain, the weird parts, especially the weird parts. You finish the last page, close the book, and set it on the table next to your foot balm and peppermint oil. Because you'll never forget, and now neither will anyone else. Word count 1069. Wind, down. Section 19. Soft close 300 words. Now as the fire fades low and your breath steadies, let it all drift. The cold, the trudging, the aching feet. Fade it all out now, like footprints slowly disappearing under falling snow. You're not on an ice shelf anymore. You're not sinking into jungle mud or shivering in a storm-torn tent. You're here, still, safe, warm. Feel the weight lift from your legs as you settle into the softness around you. Let your muscles unclench, especially the ones you didn't know you were tensing. Let your breath stretch longer, smoother, as slow as a glacier's crawl, but far more peaceful. The explorers, those grumpy, half-frozen fools, are long gone. Their maps crumbled, their boots retired, their socks displayed in museums, or long since turned to dust. But tonight they're just stories, and you listening now are wrapped in the comfort they never had. It's all okay now. The wind's stopped. The tent is warm, the tea is steeping. Somewhere in a memory that isn't yours but might as well be. Close your eyes. Picture a calm, snow-dusted path under a sky so quiet it could hush the world. Let your footsteps fade. Let the journey pause. And if your toes wiggle just a little, maybe they're saying thank you. Good night, explorer. Rest those feet. End of script. Sweet dreams.